Let's open with prayer. Holy God, we thank you for the privilege and blessing of being here this Sabbath. As we look around the world, we see the struggle of the great controversy between you and the enemy. And we see how that warfare is being prosecuted amongst the human race. Help each of us to have a clear understanding of our position and our role in the great controversy. In Jesus' name, Amen. I've had the privilege of being able to teach almost every week now for the past month. It allows us to have some level of continuity. The disadvantage is that it means the members need to have watched the previous presentation before I begin the next one. I know that sometimes you can't all do that very quickly. So last week in Martinique, I don't know if you all had the opportunity to watch that presentation. It was a continuation of the study the week before that I did in France. Where I spoke about Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And I think we focused, does anybody remember what verse? Verse 8. And the reason we looked at verse 8 is because we picked up the word hate. So we looked at Ecclesiastes 3, verse 8. And the focus was upon the word hate and its opposite, which would be love. And the reason why we were looking at that is because I had received questions, not for the first time. People always frame it this way, what the movement position is on any particular subject. And I said I could give my position, or at least comment on it. So the question was regarding warfare. And that was connected to the subject of the Second Amendment. So we looked at Ecclesiastes 3 because of the subject of war, which was connected to the subject of the Second Amendment, which is the subject of what? What is the Second Amendment about? So the answer is not guns. Self-defense, good. So I've gone backwards as you can see. Started with the Second Amendment, discussion of war, Ecclesiastes 3, and then last week, because I'd received a question about hate and my position on Ecclesiastes 3, whether or not the subject of hate in Ecclesiastes 3 is an instruction or an observation. When I say observation, I mean an observation on human nature. There is a time when human beings hate. And the difficulty with that, what is the difficulty with that? If someone wants to say something, do they get a mic or they just speak loud? Did someone speak? Who was speaking?
So it seems to me that there is a time to hate and a time to love. So the question is, what is this time?
My question was, if we're told that in certain circumstances, it says time in the verse, hate is an emotion that we experience. And my question was, what's the problem with that? If you please put your hand up so someone can give you a mic. It was Clara.
What does it mean to hate?
I'm going to suggest that you know what hate means. What's the problem with that?
It's a time to hate, not all the time. C'est ça que tu veux dire? Pas tout le temps, c'est un temps.
Okay. I would suggest the problem is if you go to the New Testament, we are clearly instructed that there is never a time to hate. If someone harms you, you turn the other cheek, you forgive them, and if feelings of anger rise up in you, you're required to give those feelings to God and to love your enemy. I think we all know that. That dichotomy or tension is something that came up in the classes. I haven't discussed it yet, which means I haven't taught it, but I spoke about turning the cheek. And in connection with turning the cheek, I spoke about eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Does anybody remember what I said about turning the cheek? It's context. I haven't proven it, but I gave my thoughts on it. And I gave it in the context of eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm asking if you remember my opinion.
So what I understood regarding the message you presented, when Jesus tells us to turn the other cheek, so is it in link with the person who hurt us and we have to turn the other cheek? So I understand through your explanation that it's not a matter of individual.
Good.
But it was for the government, the Roman government.
Thank you.
So we cannot fight against the government.
So I'm suggesting that this is a political issue as the nation of Israel is going to go or move from a theocracy to come under subjection to a pagan nation. If you're familiar with New Testament history, why is that change happening? So, as you're thinking about the answer, put your hand up. Turning the other cheek is saying, do not resist. Do not resist this political change. The question is, why is there a political change happening? Anybody have a thought? Okay, I'll tell you my thought. It's because the government of Israel is no longer safe. It's no longer fit for purpose. It's become corrupted to serve the needs of God's people or the church. And so now, God has deemed, in their wisdom, decided that the government that will take over and protect the church is not Israel. We could say the Sanhedrin, but Rome. Rome is a safer place to live don't mean the country, I mean the system. Than the government of Israel. But there comes limitations or consequences. And that's why it says when you get abused, turn the other cheek. Last week, we spoke about, as I said, the subject of hate. And if you've watched the presentation, you'll remember that the subject of hate is dealt with in the baptismal vows. Vow number. Anybody remember what vow?
C'est 12.
Vow number 1. There are 2 subjects in vow number 1. So I'm not going to go over the study. I guess people haven't watched it yet. It deals with truth. And what was the other subject? We've all done our baptismal vows. Some of us are teachers here, and we don't know. Grace.
As it say grace.
Truth and grace. Christine? So, when we discuss grace, what is grace? One word. Oh, Christian's going to do it. Do you know? Okay. Power. It's not the Protestant definition that they give. You can do a nice study to prove that grace is power. Power to do what? Good. Power to hate sin and to love, we'll say good or the truth. So that's the core lesson that you should understand from vow number 1. So the study about Ecclesiastes chapter 3 does not disregard the truth about vow number 1. The hatred of sin has to be taught. It's an instruction. In Ecclesiastes 3, this hatred here is a human experience or emotion that you feel. And they're not contradictory statements. So that's a short recap of where we got to last week. As we closed, I spoke about the subject of voting. I spoke about voting several times now over the last 2 years, I believe. And I think in May 2022, 2 years ago, I did a 3-part study on voting. And the conclusion or the summary of those studies said that it's our religious duty to vote. Does anybody have any questions on this statement that I made 2 years ago? It's not just your duty as a citizen, it's your religious duty. And we could substitute the word religious for another word. What word could we substitute religious duty for?
Belief.
A different one?
Civique.
Civic. So civic is state. So I want to stick to the concept of religion. I want to get moral. We could have moral. The thing with moral, don't say problem, but everybody has a moral duty. That's why in some countries, it's the law that you have to vote. Because the state recognizes it as a moral obligation. One word, Clara.
I was thinking about the term principle and rule.
Thank you. Christian? Christian? Oh.
Choice, he said.
Choice?
Christian, chrétien.
Okay, I'm going to put prophetic.
Donc je vais mettre le mot prophétique.
It's our prophetic duty to vote.
Il s'agit de notre devoir prophétique de voter.
Now that I've put that word,
donc maintenant que j'ai pensé à ce mot,
hopefully you agree and it makes sense.
Et j'espère que vous êtes d'accord et que ça a du sens pour vous.
We are a people of prophecy.
Parce que nous sommes des personnes de la prophétie.
That means we believe in it.
Ça veut dire que nous y croyons.
We're a people of prophecy.
Nous sommes un peuple de la prophétie.
Because our existence is based upon prophecy.
Parce que notre existence est basée sur la prophétie.
We're both observers and participants.
Nous sommes à la fois observateurs, observatrices et participants, participantes.
And as we participate in the world,
et alors que nous participons dans le monde,
we have a duty,
nous avons donc ce devoir,
or an obligation,
ou bien une obligation,
to participate in society.
De participer dans la société.
In order to try to have prophecy come to the right conclusion.
Afin que la prophétie puisse aboutir à sa bonne conclusion.
Hence, it's our prophetic duty.
Donc c'est pour ça que c'est notre devoir prophétique.
When we've spoken about this,
lorsque nous avons abordé ce sujet,
when I've spoken about it,
du moins quand j'en ai parlé,
I've highlighted an inconsistency.
J'ai souligné une incohérence.
When I say it's our prophetic duty,
Lorsque je déclare qu'il s'agit de notre devoir prophétique,
that would mean we would vote
cela signifierait que nous devrions voter
to make prophecy be fulfilled.
pour que nous puissions faire en sorte que la prophétie soit accomplie.
Is that what you would want to do?
Est-ce que c'est ce que vous voulez faire?
Be in line with prophecy.
Être en ligne avec la prophétie.
So put your hands up if it's yes.
Alors levez la main si c'est oui.
Put your hands up if it's no.
Et si c'est non, levez la main.
Should we resist prophecy?
Vous devez résister à la prophétie.
So I've got some resistance
Donc j'ai quelques personnes qui résistent
and a lot of participating or making it become fulfilled.
et beaucoup qui veulent donc faire que la prophétie s'accomplisse.
So you may or may not agree with the following statement.
Vous serez peut-être en désaccord avec la déclaration suivante.
It's question stroke statement.
C'est donc une question, you said?
Question stroke statement.
Bon, c'est une question, une déclaration, on va dire.
If we have a Sunday law,
Alors, si nous avons donc une loi du dimanche,
who will bring the Sunday law in?
qui va faire que la loi du dimanche arrive?
So we've got Sunday law.
Alors, nous avons la loi du dimanche.
Will it be the Democrats
Nous aurons, ça pourrait être les démocrates
or the Republicans?
ou bien les républicains.
Republicans.
Les républicains.
We believe, you
Nous-
believe,
Nous croyons et vous le croyez.
that's what prophecy teaches us.
C'est ce que la prophétie nous enseigne.
Prophecy will be fulfilled when the Republicans come into power,
La prophétie sera accomplie lorsque les républicains arriveront donc au pouvoir.
and whatever it is they're going to do,
Et quelle que soit la façon dont ils le feront,
it will be an environment where we will have a Sunday law.
nous aurons un environnement où il y aura donc une loi du dimanche.
The great test.
Le grand test.
So if you want prophecy to be fulfilled,
Alors si vous voulez que la prophétie s'accomplisse,
which is what you all said you want,
et c'est ce que vous avez dit vouloir,
we should vote Republican.
il nous faut voter donc républicain.
You shouldn't resist prophecy.
Il ne vous faut pas résister à la prophétie.
So you see the dichotomy.
Nous voyons là donc une dichotomie.
We claim that we should want to help prophecy along,
Nous déclamons que nous voulons aider à ce que la prophétie se réalise.
but you find in reality
Mais en réalité, ce que nous découvrons,
that if you're all going to vote Democrats,
que si vous votez démocrate,
or we'll say the left,
ou bien disons la gauche,
they're stopping prophecy.
ils empêchent à ce que la prophétie se réalise.
So is it our duty
Alors, est-ce notre devoir
to make prophecy become fulfilled,
de faire en sorte que la prophétie s'accomplisse
or to resist it?
ou bien d'y résister?
Okay, so now we know our duty is to resist prophecy.
Mais nous savons que notre devoir, c'est de résister à la prophétie.
That shouldn't come as a surprise.
Et ça ne devrait pas nous surprendre.
Because if you go to Ellen White's writings,
Parce que si vous retournez dans les écrits d'Ellen
which
White,
we won't do,
ce que nous ne ferons pas,
but she tells us explicitly, really clearly,
mais elle nous le dit de façon explicite et très clairement,
we need to do all in our power to resist
qu'il faut que nous fassions tout ce qui est en notre pouvoir de résister
the coming Sunday law,
à la loi du dimanche qui approche,
the fulfillment of prophecy.
qui est donc l'accomplissement de la prophétie.
So we're all on the same page now.
Donc par conséquent, nous sommes tous sur la même longueur d'onde.
We've said
Et nous disons
it's our prophetic duty to vote,
que c'est notre devoir prophétique de voter.
which means it's your prophetic duty.
Ça veut dire que c'est votre devoir prophétique de voter.
We'll say the left,
Nous disons donc à gauche,
because not everybody lives in America.
parce que ce n'est pas tout le monde qui vit aux États-Unis.
And we haven't defined what the left is.
Mais nous n'avons pas encore défini ce qu'est la gauche.
But we all have some idea.
Mais nous avons tous ou toutes certaines idées.
Any questions on that?
Alors, est-ce qu'il y a des questions sur ce point?
Our role as actors
Notre rôle en tant qu'acteur-actrice
is to resist prophecy.
est de résister à la prophétie.
Our role as observers
Notre rôle en tant qu'observateur,
is just to
observatrice,
see the warfare happening before us.
est de voir donc cette guerre qui est en train de se passer devant nos yeux.
So, at the end of last week's study,
Donc à la fin de l'étude de la semaine dernière,
I said this week I would pose, I believe it was 6 questions.
alors j'ai dit que j'allais répondre à 6 questions cette semaine.
So this was from the end of last week.
Alors là, il s'agissait de la fin de la semaine dernière.
6 questions
Alors, 6 questions
on voting.
sur le vote.
Who watched that presentation?
Alors d'ailleurs, qui a regardé cette présentation?
I only presented once, so once is enough. We're both the same. Okay, only a few people have.
Seulement quelques personnes l'ont regardé. Ah. She watched a lot, so she doesn't remember if it was the last
Okay.
one.
Question 1.
Donc, la première question.
Is it rational for an individual citizen to vote?
Est-ce rationnel pour un citoyen de voter?
Who can tell me what rational means?
Qui peut me dire ce que signifie le mot rationnel? Pardon? What is relative in a good sense? I don't know if you understand.
Not really.
Non, je comprends pas non plus, moi.
Well, maybe it's a translation.
Non, maybe... Okay, so conform to the reason and common sense.
Okay, so the answer I got was,
Alors la réponse que j'ai.
is it common sense for a citizen to vote?
Alors est-ce du bon sens pour un citoyenne de voter?
Clara, you had your hand up
Clara, tu avais levé la main?
to answer. Yeah, to answer the question.
Yeah, it's the same thing, same thing.
You don't want to say?
Tu veux pas le dire en tes mots? Là, j'ai rajouté en tes mots. So yes, rational is belong to reason and common sense.
We say it's all rational. 2.5 years ago, before May 22, all of you would have said it's unrational or irrational. It's irrational to vote. It's wrong. So why have you changed your mind?
Alors, I will say that voting is a right. We get this right because of the fight our ancestor gave us. Okay, let's say.
I agree with your answer, but I think 2 years ago you would have given a different answer.
So she always vote, but it's depend. Now the question is on for whom you will vote.
So 3 years ago, did you disagree with Ellen White? When she says you shouldn't be voting.
No. When I say no, that means I will keep my right to vote. So I will be not in agreement with her. Yes.
Okay, yeah, so you disagree with Ellen White. And you're happy to do that. You're happy to disobey the prophet. It's a civic right, but you're part of God's church. So it wasn't your religious duty to do it. No grounds.
No, I've got everything wrong then.
Okay, but now you've got everything right. Because your new prophet says you're allowed to. She said you're required to. So, yeah. Who wants to comment? Rosie?
So 2 years and a half ago, I will not participate to vote be- because as an Adventist, we have been taught that we should not participate or be involved into politics. But because of our new prophet, so we have been taught to read the text in their context. And we also learn to read correctly the different passages. So now I'm able to be a participant and to vote and to vote in the right side, right party.
Can you tell me what you were reading incorrectly
Alors,
about Ellen White?
peux-tu me dire ce que tu lisais de manière incorrecte dans les écrits d'Ellen White?
What did you misread?
So I'm referring to the passage where it said we should not vote.
Yes, so am I.
I was not. I'm not able to give you the reference, but I know that I read this text.
You read it. You don't need to give me the reference. My question is, what did you misunderstand or misread? Because Ellen White says you're not supposed to vote, and you said, I misread that. I'm wondering what you misread.
So I'm referring to the dispensation. In her dispensation, I think I will not be. I will be agree with her, but in my dispensation, I'm taking position that I have to vote.
One last question then. You've said it's a dispensational issue. She said it's a dispensational issue. So it's not misreading. If you want. If you're dispensational, there's no mistakes in your reading. Was Ellen White correct? Yeah.
Oui, dans son époque, oui.
So Ellen White was correct that we shouldn't vote. In her time. I'm not trying to trick you. But now you have to vote. Yeah. So why are we supposed to vote now?
Because the personnel is politique.
Because the personal is political. So 200 years ago, the personal was not political. I won't write it down, but if you juxtapose that, then you're saying 200 years ago, the personal was not political. And you and I both know that's not correct. It's always been that way. Otherwise, patriarchy would not be a problem until today. So you can't use that argument. So my question is, maybe it's just a rhetorical question that we can't answer. If we're required to vote now, because it's dispensational, say, why were we not allowed to vote then? So we don't have to answer that. But if I can suggest what you're thinking, that doesn't make any sense. Because unless you've got a really good reason, and you might have, but I've thought about it quite a lot and I can't think of a good reason. Anyone else wants to comment on question 1? Is it rational to vote? Question 2. Oh, the answer was yes. I've put a tick, but you can't see it. Question 2. Is it a moral duty to vote? Okay, we've already answered this one, I think. Unless someone wants to say anything different. Is it a moral duty to vote? Anybody who says no? Do you want to answer? You say no, it's not a moral duty.
So I said it's a moral duty to vote.
It is or it isn't?
It is. It
Okay.
is.
You agree with us? Carry on.
Because human beings lost their lives to get this right.
Thank you. I like that answer. Question number 3. We've agreed it's common sense to vote. We've agreed that there's a moral duty. So question 3. It's about morality still. Are there moral obligations on how we vote. Are there moral obligations regarding how we should vote? Everybody says yes. Anybody say no? So no one says no. If we just say yes, I'm happy just to move on with that comment. Only a comment if you said no. If you said yes, then no comment. Good. Thank you. It's common sense to vote. It's our duty to vote. And we have an obligation to vote in the right way. That's question 3. Reworded. We have an obligation to vote properly. Okay, so this is still question 3. We'll call it 3A. However you do it in your country, you get your voting slip, your piece of paper. Does everybody know what a void is? A void vote, when you void your vote. When you waste it. In English, they call it voiding your vote, or it's wasting your vote. Okay, so is everybody in the room understands that concept? Are you allowed to do that? Not legally, because you can. Morally. Question 3. If you're obliged to vote morally, are you allowed to do a void vote? Put your hands up if you say yes. VOID. V. So my question is, put your hand up if you think it's morally okay to waste your vote. Anybody says, who said depends? Patricia, take the mic. Patricia, take the mic. Tell me why you think it's morally okay to waste your vote. You're not going to answer?
No, because I explain what is a vote nul, because in France we can have vote nul, a void vote, or a white vote. So we should not mistaken.
Okay. So you changed your mind?
Tu as changé ton avis, d'avis? Yes, because she thought it was a white vote.
Okay.
So it's different. A white vote, it means that you are neither for the left or for the right.
So you're not going to vote?
You vote, but you said you put no party in your envelope. So it's a white vote. Morally, you can do that. But the void vote, as you said, it's if you put in your envelope two parties in it, so it's void. It's different, so that's why I wanted to be sure which one you are talking about. A white one, that means you don't take any position for any parties, but you vote. Or a void one, you vote, but you put two things, or you write something in your envelope, and it's cancel, it's not okay. So which one?
Everybody agrees that they are morally obliged in the way they vote. So I don't want to define what morality is, but I presume then, at least some of you, if not all of you, believe that it's morally acceptable to vote for someone that you don't agree with. We'll hold that thought for a moment. Because lots of people vote for people they don't even like. I don't know if some of you did that recently. And if you did, what's your moral framework for doing that? Because you have a moral obligation in the way that you vote. So you have to justify your morality if you're voting for people that you don't even support or agree with. In English, there's a term that says, your enemy. Do you know how you finish that sentence? You do. Is my enemy. And you have to be sure that that's a correct moral position to stand upon. Question 4. Is it justifiable for a government to force you to vote? Who agrees with that? Should the government force you to vote? Put your hands up if you agree. It doesn't matter what, any government. Put your hands up if you disagree. Okay, so most people think that it's wrong for governments to force the people to vote. So everybody agrees that it's wrong to force you to vote. But question 2, is it your moral obligation or duty to vote? You all said yes. So you all have to vote, but you don't like someone forcing you to vote. That's right. So take the microphone, Rosie. So Rosie says it's right, we have to vote, but no one can force us to. So it said moral duty. When you talk about morality, how do you understand what morality is? How do you define morality? Anyone can help you if you're not sure? We all agree that it's our moral duty to vote. You mostly agreed that it was wrong to force you to vote. I asked Rosie to define moral.
Freedom of conscience, liberty of conscience.
So morality is freedom of conscience.
So the morality is an action is a good action.
Sorry, morality is a good action.
A good thought, a positive thought.
Okay, we'll stop there. I'm going to say morality is the issue of right and wrong. It's how you know what is wrong and how you know what is right.
It's like the ethic.
Good, ethics. So if you have morality simply defined as right and wrong, good and bad, how do you know what good is and how do you know what bad is? How do you know what good is?
Based upon rules.
Rules. We'll call it law. So we define right and wrong by law. So in our context, when you say it's your moral obligation, and we spoke earlier about it being a religious duty, we'll speak about the morality in the framework of God. Before the prophet said no, and now the prophet says yes. So if morality says it's your duty, that means it's right. That means the law says, we'll say God's law, says that you have to vote. Do you agree with that? So, does that mean God is forcing you? God says the law says you have to vote. God's law. And you said that's fine. But when the government says, our law says you have to vote, you said that's bad.
You use the term constraint, force. God did not does not force us.
If God has a law that says you're obliged, you have a moral obligation, if that's not force, what do you call that?
Encourage you.
What? I didn't hear you. What did you say?
Encourage you. He encourage you to do it.
Oh, it's only encouragement, not obligation.
So I understand this a moral obligation, but your, but your question is, does the government force us? I answer no, because we are in a democracy.
My question was, doesn't matter what form of government you have, can the government create a law, which we call morality, that says you have to vote? You have an obligation. And you said that's wrong. But when it was God doing it, you said it was good.
Yes, because I have on my mind the democracy.
There are lots of democratic governments in the world that force their citizens to vote. And there are lots of dictatorships that don't force you to vote.
With this argument, I have to change my mind.
Okay, I've persuaded one person. I'll ask the question again. Is the government allowed to force you to vote? And I put in parenthesis, if God is allowed to force you to vote. We all agree? Anybody disagree? Okay, Eric.
So I think it's a violation of your liberty to force you to vote. And God cannot do it.
So God doesn't oblige you to vote. So it's not your religious duty to vote.
If I choose it, it's become a duty.
So you define what duty is. God doesn't. Because God says your duty is to worship on the seventh day. God says your duty is to worship on the seventh day. You can't redefine that religious duty. I don't think. So when it comes to voting, God is the one that's in control, that says, I expect you to vote. It's your duty. How do you say, I'll do what I want? That you can do what you want.
So you took previously the example of the 7th day. It's the same. Everybody has the freedom to accept or not to worship God.
So the government says you have to vote. If you don't vote, you don't have to listen, do you? You don't have to listen, but they'll punish you, whatever the punishment is. So if God says worship on the seventh day and you choose the first day, there'll be repercussions, won't there? You can do what you want, but you have to pay a price for that. Same with voting. So I just want to see us to see it's the same. We can't handle the two kingdoms differently. Remember, I'll go back here for the people on the video. We're back here, turning the cheek. Just because Rome is governing you, the world, you have to behave in the same way as though God was ruling you. You have to treat both the same. Whether you call that parabolic methodology or juxtapositioning. So, if we get to a place where we have different answers between a secular government and God's kingdom, and we come to different conclusions, we should know that we've made a mistake somewhere in our, I'd say, our thinking or our methodology. This is a really difficult issue because it fights against what we naturally think is acceptable. Okay, so I'm going to move on. I'm not sure what Eric's final position is. So I'm going to message you afterwards. I'm only doing that because of time. Otherwise, I'll do it openly now. 5.